They say betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the ones you thought would stand beside you forever. And that's exactly what happened to me. I'll never forget the sting of scrolling through social media one late evening, only to stumble across a picture that shattered me. My best friend, the girl who once swore we were sisters for life, was standing in a white wedding gown, surrounded by smiling faces. But my face wasn't there. My name wasn't on the guest list. I wasn't even invited. The worst part? She hadn't told me a word. Not a call, not a text, not even a casual, "By the way, I'm getting married." I remember gripping my phone so tightly that my fingers went numb. My chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped right out of me. Her caption read, "The happiest day of my life, with the people I love most." The people she loved most, and I wasn't one of them. You need to understand something before I go any further. I wasn't just her friend. I was the one who stood beside her during every heartbreak, every exam, every move to a new apartment. When she didn't have money for groceries, I cooked for her. When her car broke down, I picked her up in the pouring rain. I thought I was family to her. My name is Clara Thompson. I'm 29 years old, and until that moment, I believed loyalty meant something in this world. Clearly, I was wrong. I replayed years of memories in my mind, sleepovers filled with secrets, college nights when we promised we'd stand in each other's weddings, holidays when she chose my family dinners over her own because she said she felt more at home with me. And now, I was disposable. At first, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a small wedding. Maybe she couldn't afford too many guests. But as I kept scrolling through those glossy pictures, I saw nearly everyone from our old friend group there. Even people she once admitted she couldn't stand. But not me. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the glow of my phone. Anger mixed with heartbreak until my tears turned into something else. Something sharper, heavier. Why would she do this to me? The answer, I'd later learn, was more twisted than I could have imagined. But in that moment, staring at her smiling face on my screen, I made myself a silent promise. If she thought leaving me out would make me feel small, invisible, unworthy, she was about to learn the biggest mistake of her life. Because when her wedding day came, I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to arrive in a way that none of them would ever forget. In a limo. And when I stepped out, every single person who doubted me, pitted me, or whispered behind my back would fall silent. But before I tell you how I got there, you need to know the full story. The years of struggle, betrayal, and heartbreak that built up to that moment. Because people don't just wake up one day ready for revenge. They're forged in fire. And mine had been burning for years. To really understand why being excluded from that wedding cuts so deep, you need to know where I came from. I wasn't born into comfort or privilege. My childhood home was a cramped, two-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, where the walls were thin and the arguments between my parents were even thinner. Money was always short, tempers were always high, and affection was a rare visitor. By the time I was 10, I had learned to read grocery labels, not for nutrition, but for price. By 15, I was working part-time after school, slipping my paycheck into the kitchen drawer so my mom could cover the bills. My parents didn't thank me. They expected it. That was the rhythm of my life, giving more than I ever received. So when I met Sophie, my so-called best friend, in high school, I clung to her like she was the sister I never had. She came from a more stable home. Her parents weren't rich, but they laughed at the dinner table and supported her dreams. I envied that warmth, but more than anything, I was grateful she shared it with me. Sophie became my escape. She was loud, fearless, and full of dreams. We'd sit on her bedroom floor, paint our nails, and plan our futures. "We'll get married around the same time," she'd say with a grin, "and we'll be each other's maids of honor." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But what I didn't realize then was that even the closest friendships can carry cracks, tiny fractures that widen with time, jealousy, and unspoken resentment. After high school, Sophie went to a well-known university while I stayed behind, working 2 jobs to put myself through community college. I waitressed at a diner by day and stocked shelves at night. There were days I'd show up to class in the same uniform I'd worn the night before, eyes burning from lack of sleep. And through all of it, Sophie would text me pictures from campus parties, road trips, and sorority events. At first, I was happy for her. But slowly, her messages began to feel different. They carried a tone I couldn't ignore, mocking my exhaustion, making jokes about how I was always broke, or living like a grandma. "Clara, you're too serious," she'd laugh. "You need to loosen up. You work like you're 40 years old already." She said it as a joke, but it stung. Because the truth was, I was working like someone twice my age. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. My family didn't care that I was burning out. When I gave my mother money for bills, she spent part of it on her own little indulgences. When I tried to save for school supplies, my father reminded me it was my duty to help at home first. There was no room for my dreams. Meanwhile, Sophie never missed an opportunity to remind me of the gap between us. She'd brag about her spring breaks in Mexico, her designer shoes, her nights out. And when I couldn't join her because I was working, she'd roll her eyes and say, "You're missing out, Clara. Don't come crying when you're old and still stuck in the same place." But I didn't cry. Not then. I swallowed it, smiled, and kept grinding. There was one night, though, that I'll never forget. I had just finished a 12-hour shift and gone straight to Sophie's apartment because she begged me to come over. When I walked in, she and her college friends were sitting in a circle, sipping wine and laughing. "Clara," Sophie announced, standing up dramatically. "This is my hardworking friend. She's practically our mascot, always too busy hustling to have fun." The room erupted in laughter. My cheeks burned. I wanted to disappear. That was the first time I saw it clearly. I wasn't her equal anymore. I was her punchline. Still, I stuck around. I told myself it was temporary, that when I finished school, when I built a better life, things would even out again. But the mistreatment didn't stop there. As years passed, Sophie began to weaponize my loyalty. She'd call me in the middle of the night to bail her out when she fought with her boyfriends. She'd borrow money with promises to pay it back next week, and those weeks turned into months. She'd even guilt me into covering for her lies, telling her parents she was with me when she was actually sneaking off with someone else. And I did it. Every single time. Because I was terrified of losing the only person I thought I had. But what I didn't realize then was that Sophie wasn't just using me. She was slowly erasing me. And when I found out the real reason she hadn't invited me to her wedding, that was the moment everything changed. People say friendships fade with time, but mine with Sophie didn't just fade, it rotted. The little jabs and jokes turned into something uglier. She knew my weaknesses, and instead of protecting them, she exploited them. It started with money. Sophie had a habit of forgetting her wallet when we went out. At first, I didn't mind covering her, but it became a pattern. Dinner, drinks, road trips, I always ended up paying. "You make tips at the diner, right?" she'd say casually, as though my long hours of serving strangers were nothing but pocket change. Once, she even asked me for a loan, not for bills or rent, but to buy a designer bag. "I swear I'll pay you back, Clara," she promised. She never did. And when I brought it up months later, she snapped, "You're so obsessed with money. No wonder you're always broke." That one cut deep. But it wasn't just about money. Sophie had a cruel way of twisting my life into entertainment. When I confided in her about my father's drinking problem, she turned around and told her college friends. I overheard one of them mocking me at a party. "Oh, are you the one with the drunk dad?" They all laughed. My face burned with shame. That night, I went home and cried myself to sleep, vowing never to open up to her again. But the final straw came a year later, when I met someone, Daniel. He wasn't rich or flashy, but he was kind. He treated me with respect, something I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I thought maybe I deserved love. Sophie didn't like that. She started making sly comments. "Are you sure he's into you, Clara? Guys like him usually want someone prettier." Or, "Don't get too attached. He'll probably leave once he realizes you're a workaholic." At first, I brushed it off, but then I discovered something unforgivable. One night, Daniel seemed distant, distracted. When I asked what was wrong, he avoided my eyes. I pressed, and eventually, he confessed. Sophie had been texting him, flirting with him, suggesting that he'd be better off with someone like her. My heart stopped. I remember staring at my phone after reading the screenshots he showed me. The same girl I had trusted with my deepest secrets was trying to steal the one good thing in my life. When I confronted Sophie, she laughed. "Oh, come on, Clara. It was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." But I saw the smugness in her eyes. It wasn't a joke. It was a test to see if she could take from me simply because she wanted to. That was the night something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just humiliated. I was angry. I started to pay closer attention, to notice her lies, the way she used people, the way she crafted her perfect image online while stepping on anyone who threatened to outshine her. She thought I was too meek, too loyal, too soft to fight back. But she had underestimated me. So when I found out she was getting married, not from her, but from a mutual friend, my blood ran cold. I asked why I hadn't been invited, my voice trembling with confusion. The friend hesitated, then finally said the words that burned themselves into my memory. Sophie said you'd embarrass her, that you're not on her level anymore. Not on her level. I sat there in silence, the words echoing in my skull. My years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love meant nothing. She had erased me from her life, just like that. But instead of breaking me, that moment hardened me. I realized Sophie had always seen me as less. The poor friend, the desperate friend, the one she could use as a stepping stool while she climbed higher. And that's when I decided, if she wanted me out of her story, then fine. But when I came back into it, it would be on my terms. She would regret underestimating me. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I would plan. And when the day of her wedding came, I wouldn't just show up. I'd show up in a way that silenced every laugh, every whisper, every insult she had ever thrown my way. Because this time, I wasn't the broken friend. I was the storm she never saw coming. After I learned I wasn't on Sophie's level, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't send her angry texts demanding an explanation. I went silent. And silence, I realized, was my greatest weapon. Because while Sophie thought she had written me out of her life story, she had no idea I was writing my own, and she was about to become the villain in it. I started with myself. For too long, I had been surviving, not living. Always working to pay bills, always sacrificing my dreams for others. But now, I had a fire in my chest that wouldn't let me rest. I picked up extra shifts, not because I was desperate, but because I had a plan. I cut unnecessary expenses, saved every tip, and started researching opportunities that could change my financial life. That's when I found a small business mentorship program funded by local entrepreneurs looking to help people like me. I applied, not expecting much. But weeks later, I got the email. Accepted. Suddenly, I was sitting in workshops surrounded by people who believed in growth, in possibility, in building something from nothing. For the first time, I wasn't just a waitress or a stand-in friend. I was Clara Thompson, the woman with potential. I poured myself into it. I worked on my own small business idea, event planning. It was ironic, given Sophie had excluded me from hers. But I realized I had a talent for organizing, styling, and creating unforgettable moments. Every night after work, I'd sketch out ideas, build proposals, and practice my pitch. My mentors noticed my dedication. Within months, I landed my first clients, small birthdays, engagement dinners, a retirement party. Each event turned out better than the last. Word spread. My name started circulating in circles I'd never been part of before. And slowly, my savings account began to grow. But I kept all of this hidden from Sophie. Whenever mutual friends mentioned her, I smiled politely, never revealing the storm I was quietly building. Outwardly, I was still the same Clara, tired, quiet, always working. Inwardly, I was sharpening every tool I'd need to strike. Then came the perfect opportunity. One of my mentors connected me to a high-profile client who wanted her daughter's wedding planned. It was a lavish affair, limo rentals, 5-star catering, designer decor. I threw myself into it with everything I had, determined to prove myself. The night of that wedding, I stood at the back of the ballroom as the chandeliers glittered overhead and the guests applauded. The event had gone flawlessly. The bride hugged me with tears in her eyes, thanking me for making her dream day come true. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't just belong in those elegant spaces. I could thrive in them. Which meant when Sophie's big day arrived, I wasn't going to slink in like the forgotten friend she thought I was. I was going to arrive like a woman she could never ignore. So I made the call. I booked the limo. Black, sleek, with tinted windows that reflected the city lights. When it pulled up outside the rental office, the manager raised his brows. "Special occasion?" he asked. I smiled. You could say that. But that was only half the plan. Because showing up in style was one thing. Exposing Sophie for who she truly was, that was the real victory I wanted. See, over the years, I had collected more than just memories of her cruelty. I had texts, messages, and receipts of the ways she used people, lied to cover her tracks, and mocked those who supported her. At the time, I didn't realize I was building evidence. But now, it was like fate had been preparing me for this moment all along. I organized everything neatly, tucking it into a folder. And on the day of her wedding, that folder would be in my hands. Not because I wanted to ruin her marriage, but because she needed to face the truth. The people who saw her as flawless, perfect Sophie deserved to know who she really was. I kept rehearsing in my mind, the doors opening, me stepping out of the limo in my best dress, folder in hand, and watching the smug smile fall right off her face. She thought I was gone. She thought I was forgotten. She thought I was beneath her. But she was about to learn the cost of betrayal. And when the spotlight turned, it wouldn't be on her. It would be on me. The morning of Sophie's wedding, I woke before sunrise. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had waited years for this moment, and now it was here. I slipped into a deep emerald green gown I had saved for months to buy. The fabric hugged my figure, elegant without being flashy, the kind of dress that whispered power instead of screaming for it. I curled my hair, applied my makeup with precision, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl Sophie once mocked. I saw the woman she never thought I could become. The limo pulled up outside my apartment building right on time. The chauffeur opened the door with a polite bow. "You look stunning, ma'am," he said. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady, though inside, my heart was pounding. As the sleek black car glided through the city streets, I pictured Sophie's face when she saw me. Would it be shock? Anger? Fear? Maybe all three. When we arrived at the venue, a grand estate draped in white roses and golden ribbons, the parking lot was already crowded with luxury cars. Guests in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos streamed toward the entrance, laughter ringing in the air. The chauffeur stepped out and opened my door. Slowly, deliberately, I placed one heel on the pavement, then the other. The chatter around me faltered. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. She came in a limo. I heard someone whisper. Another voice gasped. "Is that Clara?" I didn't rush. I stood tall, let the sunlight catch the shimmer of my dress, and walked forward like I owned the place. With every step, I felt the weight of years of humiliation fall away. For the first time, I wasn't the background friend. I was the headline. Inside, the ceremony had just begun. Sophie stood at the altar, radiant in her gown, her groom smiling nervously beside her. The priest's voice filled the room, until the heavy doors creaked open. Every head swiveled, and there I was. For a heartbeat, the entire hall froze. Sophie's smile faltered, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Clara?" she whispered, her voice carrying in the stunned silence. I walked down the aisle slowly, each click of my heels echoing like a drumbeat. Gasps rippled through the guests. Phones came out, recording. I could almost hear the hashtags forming in their minds. When I reached the front, I turned not to Sophie but to the audience. My voice rang clear. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but before anyone here blesses this marriage, there's something you all deserve to know. I opened the folder in my hand and pulled out the first page, a printout of texts Sophie had sent Daniel, trying to lure him away from me. I held it high. "These," I said, "are messages Sophie sent to the man I was dating at the time. Flirting, lying, trying to destroy our relationship, all while pretending to be my best friend." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Sophie's groom stiffened, his eyes darting to her face. I pulled out another sheet. "Here are messages where she mocked me for struggling with bills, laughed at my father's alcoholism, and used me as her cover for lies to her parents." Gasps turned into murmurs. Faces shifted from shock to disgust. I laid down the final blow, a photo of Sophie in another man's arms, time-stamped just months before this very wedding. "And here," I said, my voice sharp as glass, "is Sophie promising someone else that she wasn't sure she wanted to go through with this marriage." Her groom's face drained of color. He took a step back from her. Sophie lunged toward me, her voice shrill. "You're lying. You're jealous." But the evidence was in my hands. In their hands now, too, because guests had crowded around, snatching up the papers, passing them from row to row. Screenshots lit up phone screens as whispers turned to angry accusations. "You used her," someone muttered. "She tried to break up her friend's relationship." Another gasped. "She's been cheating." Sophie's perfect image shattered in real time. Her groom turned to her, his jaw clenched. "Is this true?" he demanded. "I know it's not," she stammered, but her voice faltered under the weight of so many watching eyes. And that's when I leaned closer, so only she could hear me, though the camera still caught the icy calm on my face. "You said I wasn't on your level," I whispered. "You're right. I'm far above it." Then I stepped back, straightened my shoulders, and turned to the crowd. "Congratulations," I said with a faint smile. "The truth is finally out." The room erupted into chaos, shouts, gasps, guests storming out. Sophie's groom pulled off his ring and tossed it to the floor. Sophie stood trembling, humiliated, her face pale as the white roses around her. And me? I walked back up the aisle, my head high, as the cameras flashed. The limo waited outside, and as I slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of the chaos behind me. For once, Sophie was speechless. When I left Sophie's wedding that day, the chaos behind me sounded like thunder. Guests shouting, chairs scraping, Sophie crying out as her groom stormed away. It all blended into a storm of voices I didn't bother to look back at. I had done what I came to do, but the fallout? That lasted far longer than the ceremony. The very next morning, social media was ablaze. Guests had posted videos, screenshots, and whispers of what had happened. "Bride exposed at her own wedding." One headline read on a gossip blog. Hashtags with Sophie's name trended locally. The perfect image she had built for years gone in hours. Her groom officially called off the marriage before the reception dinner could even happen. Rumor was he returned all the deposits under his name and told her family she'd never fooled him again. By the end of that week, he blocked her on every platform. Her parents were humiliated. I later heard that her mother collapsed into tears, wailing that she didn't raise a liar and a cheat. Her father, a stern man who once praised Sophie as the pride of the family, refused to even speak to her. But the damage didn't stop at home. The community turned. Friends she thought would defend her quietly distanced themselves. The same people who once laughed at her jokes about me now whispered about her behind closed doors. Invitations dried up. Social circles closed. Suddenly, Sophie wasn't the golden girl anymore. She was the scandal no one wanted near their reputation. And the business world wasn't kinder. The company where her groom's family held influence cut ties with her overnight. She lost a job offer she'd been bragging about for months. People didn't want their names attached to hers. For someone who lived off appearances, losing her image was like losing oxygen. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Sophie stopped showing her face in public for weeks. She avoided cafes, skipped family gatherings, and even deactivated her social media for a while. And yet, a part of me knew it wasn't just about being caught. It was about being exposed by me. The girl she once called too boring, too broke, too plain, had walked into her fairy tale day and torn the mask from her face. It was poetic justice. But I won't lie, there was a moment when I questioned myself. Sitting alone in my apartment, watching the storm play out online, I wondered, had I gone too far? Had I ruined her entire life over my own pain? Then I remembered the years of humiliation. The nights I cried because she mocked my family struggles. The way she tried to steal Daniel. The way she cut me out of her wedding like I was trash. And I knew this wasn't cruelty. It was balance. Sophie had built her life on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. I simply held up the mirror. The fallout spread wider than even I imagined. Old friends reached out to me, apologizing for laughing at Sophie's jokes years ago, admitting they'd always sensed something was wrong. Strangers messaged me online, calling me brave for standing up publicly. And Sophie? She didn't message me. Not once. But one night, weeks later, I got a knock at my door. When I opened it, there she was. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes swollen from crying, and her once perfect posture had collapsed into something smaller, weaker. She didn't speak right away. She just stood there, trembling. Finally, her voice cracked. "Why, Clara? Why would you do that to me?" I stared at her for a long moment. Then I answered, calm but firm. "I didn't do anything to you, Sophie. You did this to yourself. I just refused to cover it up this time." Her lip quivered. She opened her mouth, but no words came. And then she left, walking down the hallway like a shadow of the girl she used to be. That was the last time I saw her. By the time she disappeared from my life for good, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even bitter. Because while Sophie's world crumbled, mine was just beginning to rise. And soon, I discovered that exposing her wasn't just revenge. It was freedom. After Sophie vanished from my life, the silence felt strange at first. For years, my days had been filled with her chaos, her late-night calls, her careless demands, her laughter at my expense. Without her, there was peace. But peace can be uncomfortable when you've never known it. I had to relearn what it meant to exist, without someone constantly reminding me I was less. At first, I focused on work. My event planning business began to bloom faster than I could have dreamed. The same connections that helped me rise took notice of how I carried myself after Sophie's wedding drama. I wasn't the humiliated friend in their eyes. I was the woman who dared to stand up for herself, the one who wouldn't let betrayal go unanswered. Clients poured in. Small events grew into grand ones. Soon, I was coordinating charity galas, corporate gatherings, and even weddings for people who wanted their big day to feel unforgettable, just not in the way Sophie's had. One night, after a long event, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine, scrolling through old photos. There were pictures of Sophie and me, arm in arm, smiling like the world belonged to us. For a moment, the ache returned. But then I looked at myself in the mirror across the room. The woman I saw wasn't that naive girl anymore. She wasn't the background character, the punchline, the disposable friend. She was me, Clara Thompson, independent, successful, whole. It hit me then. Sophie had actually given me a gift. By cutting me out of her life so cruelly, she had forced me to find my own strength. To build a life not defined by loyalty to someone who didn't value me, but by loyalty to myself. And slowly, I stopped feeling bitterness. I didn't forgive her, not fully, but I no longer carried her weight on my shoulders. Life moved on. I found new friends, people who celebrated my wins instead of mocking them. I found joy in small moments, morning coffee, sunsets after long events, laughter that didn't come at someone's expense. And yes, eventually, I found love again. This time with a man who saw me not as someone to control or test, but as an equal partner. He never asked me to shrink so he could shine. We grew side by side, and that, I realized, was what love should feel like. Looking back, the limo wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of arriving in my own story, of choosing not to be silent anymore, of stepping into the room, head high, and demanding to be seen. So if you've ever been betrayed, humiliated, or cast aside, I want you to remember this. You are not defined by the people who try to erase you. You are defined by the strength you build when you rise anyway. Every scar you carry is proof that you survived something meant to break you. And those scars? They're not weaknesses. They're armor. So keep going. Keep fighting for your truth. Because one day, the same people who laughed at you will have no choice but to fall silent when you walk into the room. And when that day comes, you won't even need revenge. You'll already have won. Every scar tells a story of survival. Keep fighting for your truth. And if you felt my story tonight, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because your voice matters too.